Hi everybody, welcome to Data Management Matters, and today we're going to be talking about data dictionaries. We're going to look at a definition of what that is, why they're important, who's going to use them and when. We're going to look at how you'd actually build one for yourself. We'll look at how you need to think about the different components to be able to embed this properly in the organisation, and then some little words of advice from my own experiences embedding some of these. So let's get started. So, much like any dictionary, it's just a resource that contains the data elements that make up a data set. It gives you the information about the context and the meaning of the data held in that data set. Typically, you'll see these data dictionaries for data repositories, databases, data warehouses, the like, sometimes for business processes, for reports, for many other things. The important thing is that there are three elements to a data dictionary. You have a name of each of those data elements. You have a definition for each of the data to help you understand the meaning and the context. And finally, you have a location. Where can you find each of those data elements? Is it in a table, in some database, or on... Okay, now we're going to take a look at some examples of some data dictionaries. Here we have one for a business process. So we can see we have the process down the left side and the different steps. And importantly, we've got the actual pieces of data used and where they've come from. So a very simple one to start with, and we can also add in, are these critical? Are these the most important things? Are these material to the process? Which can be really helpful for governance and the right level of management in the future. Then we have an example that is more of a sort of technical IT engineering focus, where we look at a table from a database. We can see we have those technical physical column names down here, a description for all of those columns, and then some of the other further metadata here, the data type, the length, if there's any default values, and some relationships as well. So what table are these different columns, physical data elements a part of? And finally we have an example of what I'd call a more full data dictionary, where we have a huge range of content here. So we start with our business level names, data elements, the descriptions. Then we see how those map to the physical or the technical data elements we have here. Again, we can see that what I call technical metadata, some data type, if it's nullable. And also we have an example here of perhaps some governance type metadata, looking at if it's personal data, what personal data categories are included, and then finally perhaps some stuff around ownership and sort of criticality, materiality, and who the data owners are and what data domains they map to, perhaps for further governance or management. So you can see that there is actually a very wide range of metadata we could capture, and really it's about working out what is the most appropriate and efficient for you to capture and manage, and what's going to deliver the most value at the end of the day. So just a side note on the types of metadata that we talk about in a data dictionary. The DAMA Book of Knowledge refers to technical metadata, business metadata, and operational metadata. Now, whilst I won't disagree with the definitions of those, I'm not sure where they are the most helpful, because does it miss the point slightly? And what I mean by that is I've just taken the same example here on screen as we were looking at before, but I've got rid of the colours along the top so we don't get distracted by those different flavours of metadata. I think the most important things to draw out are where we have technical metadata in the sense that it is machine readable and extractable, and therefore you have amazing opportunities to automate that, to gather that in an automated fashion. No need to have some human input to manage that. Then we need to recognise on the more business side, the human side, where do we need input? Okay, we have these two sections here, but they could be subtly different too. The first one, a description, always going to need human input, always going to need validation, always going to need to have that business subject matter expertise. On the right hand side there, we have the business metadata still, but it's things that are inferred from all the other information. And actually, if we get to a point where we've gathered this effectively, could we begin to put this through some sort of machine learning algorithm, through some AI, to begin to automate to some degree what we're capturing? Now, I still think you need human validation at some point, but you can see that having that split of what's automatable and what's maybe not is a good way to understand what resource you'll need. Okay, so let's now have a think about who uses a data dictionary and why. So first of all, perhaps the data source owner will want to have a view of what data they own and that they manage, and do they have adequate understanding of that to be able to manage it effectively. You have the actual people managing that data day to day. How can they understand the level of security, for example, a security classification so that they can access it in a responsible manner and make sure they don't make basic errors. We have our data analysts and scientists community, the ones who are going out there searching for different disparate data sources and trying to figure out whether they could join them together and how. So having a way to find that really easily in very simple language will make a big difference to their time to value. Then we have our change practitioners, so when we're looking at changing applications, introducing new products, integrations of data, we need to have clear understanding of that. And we need to know the technical and business level metadata so that we can join those together effectively and reduce our risk of downstream impacts. We also have our process owners, so would they be able to see what data they're using and be able to validate that they are from approved data sources, and do they know that that data is well understood and has good management behind the scenes. We also have our data consumers. Now, everybody we've just talked about could fit into that bucket of data consumers, but this is just that catch-all of, as we move into this world of managing data more effectively, we need to have full understanding and trust. And fundamentally, that's what data dictionaries give you, and that's what the consumers want. So all of these different types of colleagues will want and drive value from your data dictionary. Okay, getting back to some definitions. So we think about data dictionary, we've already covered that. It's that resource which is that collection of your terms, the meaning and the location of that data. Your inventory, so an inventory is a list of what you have right here, right now. So our data asset inventory is that full list of all the data assets around the organization. If we want to have data as an asset, we need to manage it as such, and having an inventory of that is key. And then we go to catalogs. So what's a catalog? It's what you use when you're shopping for stuff, when you're trying to get stuff you want, which is different to an inventory of what you have. So when we think about a data catalog, we're actually thinking about how do we search for data that we want. So if I draw a picture that looks a little bit like this, where we start with the data asset inventory up the top, and we can see that that's linking down to those different assets and sources that we have around our organization. Then we can say, well, actually, we can say that each of those have a data dictionary. Great, we can tie the two things together. Then we can say a catalog comes along and actually gives people access to those dictionaries. It takes them to the content that they want and that they need. Maybe, as we'll talk about in a sec, we want to have this all together under one tool. Definitely don't need to, but would that be beneficial as a simple central place for everybody to understand data? And if we do have it in that one tool, that means that we can have the same place that stewards go to manage their data, the same place that owners go to understand the data and the coverage that they have, and finally for the consumers to actually come in and get access to the data they need quickly and effectively. Okay, now we're going to look at how we articulate the benefit of having a data dictionary. So the first thing and the most important thing is regulatory compliance. Are we being lawful, and actually are we being ethical as well, is the biggest thing at the moment. So being able to use your data dictionary to evidence compliance with regulation is a huge benefit in the first place. Then we look at actually risk management. Actually, again, having that understanding of the data, where it is, do we have multiple copies of it, what conditions it's in, having that documented somewhere can really reduce your risk and let you take appropriate action. Then your operational effectiveness, how efficient can you be? Are we still looking for the same data over and over again? Do we have to keep asking for the same definitions? Do we have to keep extracting the same metadata over and over again? Actually, if we can have this in one place, well managed, that can give us huge benefits from cost saving and reduction of time wasted. And finally, value generation at the end of it. So whilst all that's good stuff to run the business, actually we can take data dictionaries, and now in the land of data scientists and crazy AI and analytics, being able to find really good trusted sources and the right ways to join them together is going to be so valuable, and that's what data dictionaries are going to give you. Okay, so if you want to go ahead and build your own data dictionary, what are some steps you can follow to do that? So here we go, I have a 4-step plan we're going to walk through really quickly. So first of all, before you do anything, you want to make sure you've agreed your scope and your standards. What's going to be my width of the metadata to capture, and how deep am I going to go? How much detail do I need? Is that going to meet my requirements from all my stakeholders and my owners and my consumers? Once that's agreed, we can actually go out and see if anything already exists. Data dictionaries are one of those things that might already, and a good chance, do exist in some shape or form. So go out there, research your organisation, and find out if there's anything you can start from. Once you know all your potential sources, if they already exist or not, or new sources of knowledge, whether that be people or processes or extracting from some application, you need to gather that all together and begin to distill it, begin to curate it, and once you're in a good state, start to validate that back with the stakeholders. The validation step is extremely key to make sure that you are telling an accurate and true story. Finally, once we've got all that buy-in, we want to look to publish that. It's no good having all this information hidden away on your own desktop. It needs to be somewhere accessible, it needs to be somewhere public, and it needs to be somewhere anybody can start to use it, and more importantly as well, begin to feed back if there are problems. We need to make sure we're continually improving this thing. So don't just think it's once and done, get out there, but be ready to make it better and better and better. Okay, now let's think about bedding in the capability in the organization. So we're going to use this 9-box model we have here. It's out of my own head, it's nothing industry standard. So starting right from the top, the strategy. If data is not part of your business strategy right now, you have a big problem. It needs to be right now, yesterday. And actually having an understanding of what data you have and what it means is fundamental. So data dictionaries and more broadly the understanding of data has to be front and center in your strategy. And think about what capabilities you need and how your business is architected and how you can work with that to embed this. Under policy, do you have a dedicated policy for data already? Will this need to be extended for data dictionaries specifically, or will you leverage existing perhaps information security policies or other technology policies? Governance. We need to think about the classic examples of ownership and sign-off and approval, and also the people who will be working day to day, the stewardship, what responsibilities and sort of good practice codes of conduct do they need to follow, and for the consumers, the people who are going to use these data dictionaries afterwards, how can they know they're trusted, and how do they know they're not going to be on the hook if they do trust them and they're not quite right. Funding. So all this good stuff needs to be paid for one way or the other. So have we thought about how we're going to pay for it in a run the business type scenario versus a change the business, an investment in the business? And do you have separate funding for when things go wrong, when you need to take action quickly to solve a breach, for example? Is that separate funding, and do you need to account for that? Oversight. So it's all well and good building these things, but unless we can measure the quality of them and the coverage of them, we don't know whether we're actually making progress or whether we're doing the right thing. So making sure that whatever risk or oversight functions you have in the organisation understand the value of data dictionaries and data management, and then being able to work with them to report and measure the risk effectively. Operating model. People are going to know what their roles are, what their responsibilities are, what processes to follow as we'll come to, and how those roles will interact with each other, and what are the different scenarios and maybe handover points throughout this journey from zero to a full data dictionary. Engagement. So a huge part of this that can't be underestimated is engaging with people, finding out who your advocates are, finding out who your challengers are, how do you educate them better, how do you spread the word, and how do you really get the message out there. And do you need to set up some sort of centre of excellence, some sort of team that can be there to provide support, best practice and advice throughout this? And then coming on to that, support, so dedicated support. You're going to get people to work in a different way. That can be daunting, it can be challenging. Do we have the right guidance to help people? Do we have the right training to upskill colleagues? And is there a community that they can leverage and lean upon to help them upskill again and make sure they're doing the right thing and share their own knowledge back with maybe less experienced members of that community? And finally, processes. So we want really clear, simple processes so that people can have confidence that if they follow them, they are doing the right thing. And it needs to be across both the sort of business as usual activities, the change management activities, and thinking about that oversight and that quality assurance processes. How do we know what we captured is trustworthy and of high quality? Thank you very much for watching. Today we've looked at data dictionaries, we've looked at what they are, how we define them and similar capabilities. We've looked at why they're important, who's going to use them, and where they fit in around the organisation. We've looked at the steps you would need to build one yourself, and then had a little discussion about all the different components within a business that you might need to look at updating or changing if you want to be able to fully embed this capability. So I hope it's been useful, and I hope to see you soon on Data Management Matters. Thank you very much.